The 15th plenary meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. The Assembly will begin its consideration of Agenda Item 64, entitled Use of the Veto, to hold a debate pursuant to Resolution 76/262 of April 26, 2022, on the situation as to which the veto was cast at the 10,000th meeting of the Security Council on September 18, 2025. The documentation under this item is listed in the Journal of the United Nations. I will now make a statement as the President of the General Assembly. A simple no. It might look mundane whenever a permanent member of the Security Council casts a veto. An almost effortless act. Yet the effects are consequential. They reverberate far beyond the Security Council chamber, beyond New York, felt by communities across the world. A veto can extinguish hope for those trapped in conflict. It falls hardest on those who turn to the United Nations for peace, for relief, for a path out of suffering, for hope. And when it results in constant blockages, it can damage the credibility of this whole institution. The Charter makes clear that the Council carries the primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security under Article 24. Yet, the veto is not a privilege. It's a responsibility, entrusted to 5 nations to be exercised rarely, in the spirit of peace and security for all. That responsibility must never forget the lives it touches. Lives like those in Gaza, where the situation is catastrophic. In the past days, weeks, and months, men, women, and children have been killed by sheltering or waiting for food. Those who survive are mourning the cold tents. They are starving. They are searching for clean water. Thousands of children without parents. At the same time, hostages remain in captivity in unimaginable conditions. Their families wait in torment, not knowing whether they are alive or dead. A situation that is politically and morally unacceptable, and where the world is wondering where the United Nations is. The situation in Gaza is precisely the kind of crisis where the United Nations is called upon to act, where failure to act undermines the credibility of this organization itself. Therefore, we owe it not only to the people of Gaza, but also to our institution, if we are to preserve faith in it, to act now. Especially as it's clear what must be done. The world calls for an immediate ceasefire, for unhindered access to humanitarian aid, and for the immediate release of all hostages. As a deeply regrettable deadlock of the principal organ of the United Nations tasked with maintaining peace and security erodes global trust in the United Nations itself, it is therefore important that today member states take up this responsibility by bringing this topic to the General Assembly, the heart of the United Nations, through the debate on the use of the veto. The veto initiative, as many of you know, existed since 2022. In that time, 20 vetoes have been cast. And each time, the General Assembly has stepped in to provide an essential measure of accountability as the United Nations' most representative organ, which is empowered by Article 10 of the Charter to deliberate on matters of peace and security. Each time this assembly has been convened, It ensured that the veto is not exercised in silence, but subject to the scrutiny of the international community. Excellencies, also today the Assembly underlines by this plenary meeting that it's not the United Nations as an institution failing on Gaza. UN staff is even risking their lives to overcome the blockage of humanitarian aid. And the wider membership of this organization has spoken with clarity. The resolution vetoed in the Security Council contained the core demands that were already adopted by this Assembly. An immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire respected by all parties. The immediate and dignified release of all hostages held by Hamas and other groups. And the immediate lifting of all restrictions on the entry and distribution of humanitarian aid throughout Gaza, delivered safely and at scale by the United Nations and its partners in respect to international humanitarian law and its obligations. These same demands were reaffirmed only weeks ago in the New York Declaration, endorsed by a large majority of states. And the good news is that since the moment the veto debate has been put on the agenda, these demands, together with last week's high-level international conference on the two-state solution, have already had an impact, including the clear call that annexation will never be accepted. On Monday, the President of the United States presented a plan building on earlier proposals from Arab Muslim countries, European states, the United States itself, and many, many other countries around the world for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, a massive increase in humanitarian aid, and the release of all hostages. These calls now have to be implemented without delay or reservation by both the Israeli government and Hamas. If implemented, it would finally offer the opportunity to end the war in Gaza. As outlined by the many GA resolutions, we must seize this chance to end the suffering in Gaza now. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict cannot be resolved through endless war, permanent occupation, or recurrent terror. The only path to lasting peace, security, and dignity for both Palestinians and Israelis is a two-state solution. After the war, as many countries and the General Assembly underlined at the beginning of this week, we need sustained dialogue, credible negotiation, and tangible steps towards realizing the two-state solution, in line with the UN Charter, international law, relevant UN resolutions, and the New York Declaration. That is the path to justice, that is the path to peace, and that is how we uphold the principles and the credibility of this organization.